We are so happy also, and we're so proud, and we just would like for you to show some love and to give the chairman of our board a big round of applause, Reverend Walter Cronkite. I would also just like to thank my Congressman Chris Van Hollen, who has been with me all the way. He has written, the last count, 5 or 6 letters to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, had a conversation with the EPA administrator. He's a real fighter. For those of you who live in Montgomery County, this is your congressman as well as Congressman Wynn. Support them because they are supporting you. So please also help me to thank them. And later we'll be joined by Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who you know we love. She was the co-sponsor of No Fear 1. She is going to introduce No Fear 2. And you know that this is a warrior. At the very base of her spirit, she is a warrior. And so we thank God for her. The passage of the Congressional Disclosures Act is absolutely essential because federal government employees and their families know that testifying before Congress or even contacting a congressional office regarding corruption, discrimination, whatever, is the kiss of death for your career in the federal government. In fact, federal agencies delight in showcasing, like some form of Roman theater, the blood sport of tearing federal government employees apart when they've made the courageous decision to tell the truth or to expose corruption in the federal government. With unlimited taxpayer dollars and no accountability, many employees like Patricia Lawson simply die. They die at their desk from hypertension, from strokes, from various forms of cancer. They're working under the enormous burden, 8 to 10 hours a day, working under a government determined to silence their voice of conscience. Or a government entraps and sends them to federal prison, like John Graham, a white man who testified on my behalf in federal court. The coalition has reports of employees being arrested on their jobs, of course, at 12 noon, for the most dramatic effect when everybody has gathered for lunch so that the entire agency can witness the carnage. Warning notices, later termination is the most common form of political violence, sending a strong message to other employees that if you dare speak out, this is what will happen to you. To blow the whistle before Congress is an act of resistance to unmitigated and unaccountable power. When federal employees, like myself, return to Congress after testifying with horror stories of intimidation and retaliation, in many instances, if you don't have members of Congress like I do, and some of us in this room do, you're greeted at best with polite disrespect, or maybe disinterest. Sometimes a member of Congress will write a letter. If you're lucky, maybe you'll get 2 letters. I was fortunate that Congressman Van Hollen has written 5 letters on my behalf. Congressman Wynn has written letters on my behalf. But that is the exception and not the rule. And it has to become the rule and not the exception. So we have to hold Congress accountable. Now, because of the Congressional Disclosures Protection Act, the truth will be told in the halls of Congress for the entire world to know. After I prevailed in a historic lawsuit and testified twice before Congress, the EPA Deputy Chief of Staff, Ray Spears, proudly submitted a statement to federal court declaring that if EPA could not force me to accept their settlement offer, which included termination, I would be transferred to an office and have to work under him. His threat was not idle. Mr. Spears is now my second-line supervisor. And since that time, I have been the victim of the most vicious and unrelenting retaliation. And that's the cost of winning a victory in court, leading an effort for legislation, and testifying before Congress. But why did he feel so bold as to submit that document to the courts? There's one reason, because he knew that he would not be held accountable for anything he was going to do. So this legislation calls Congress to account. It provides the opportunity to restore the integrity, intent, and spirit of the Constitution and our right to petition Congress. It is time for Congress to act and to show their outrage that federal employees and their families are literally being shredded when they expose corruption, racism, and sexism, and looting of the national treasury. Doctors are losing their license when they expose malpractice and wrongdoings in hospital. And we're going to hear from the Semmelweis Society, a group of brave doctors who've now stepped forward to say that they're blowing the whistle in America's hospitals.
Now,
we are the children. We, all of us, we are the children of Dr. King. Absolutely. And we are determined that government will be a place, our government will be a place where racism, sexism, retaliation will be wiped out and replaced with integrity and equality. The passage of this law is an essential part of that equation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Council.
Congressman Van Allen, we're about to hear some words from the kind of basic support we have around this country for what you're doing. And I just want to say that having been here in the decade of the 80s, when we fashioned a code of conscience of Democrats and Republicans in the House and Senate to correct the situation in South Africa, I know many of the chairs of the committees now. In the Senate and in the House, they're Democrats and Republicans. And I'm telling you, they're waiting for you to issue the call. And they, like many of us here, are like another sage in the Civil Rights Movement era. His name was James Brown. And he said, Papa don't take no mess. I want you to hear from several members of this code of conscience that's black and white and red and brown and yellow together, that's looking to you for this leadership.
That's right.
I don't want to put pressure on you, but they want to say a few things.
No, we want to hear from you. That's right.
Well, we have plenty of meetings.
I had
There's
this.
a list.
Somebody, I had a list when I came in, and I want to list. We have first Dr. Roland Shalafo, president of the Semmelweis Society.
Thank you.
Good morning, Honorable Congressman with other honorable members of Congress, attendants, distinguished guests, colleagues, and members of the media. It's an honor and privilege for me, as the current president of Semmelweis Society International, to be invited to appear here today. I'm pleased to present our views on this most important pending legislation. Semmelweis is also honored to have been given an opportunity to support Congressman Wynn's proposed amendment to the Congressional Disclosure Protection Act of 2007, otherwise I guess known as CDPA HR 4650. As has been said before, and I'll reiterate, the CDPA is the second most, I think it's the second major civil rights act of law in this century, and the second in a series of continuing amendments to what is being commonly referred to as no-fear legislation. Semmelweis' membership, just to kind of give you a brief outline about our membership. Essentially, we're comprised of a large number of healthcare providers and legal professionals from around the nation. Through years of experience, our member professionals have witnessed firsthand how numerous healthcare institutions unfortunately place profits and stockholder rates of return over the proper healthcare and well-being of millions of American citizens. We are speaking on behalf of thousands of Americans who have been denied proper treatment and care. Proper treatment and healthcare should be an American birthright. Most of the healthcare institutions I speak about today currently receive hundreds of millions of dollars in our federal taxpayer aid to help them treat the most vulnerable members of our society.